Welcome to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. I am your host, Candace Dellacona. And on the pod today, I have a fellow podcaster. I'm so excited to welcome Vanessa Grigoriadis, who is here to share some wisdom as we like to do on the podcast. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we will go into a little about how we met because I think one of the things that we found that we had in common is that you and I are searching for a platform or have found a platform, but we are really doing our best to try to provide resources to people like us, those who are in the middle, as the title of my podcast denotes, that we're in this sandwich generation. We found ourselves in the middle, and you are the perfect person because you are the host of the relatively newly launched So My Parents Are Old podcast.
That's right.
And so we're so happy to have you here. Before we get into the podcast and how you started, I want to know a little bit about you, who you are, how you got into this podcast world. So let's take it from the top.
Sure. So I'm from New York City. I'm from the Upper West Side. My dad was a professor. My mom is an artist. And I grew up, I'm Greek American. My father was actually from Istanbul and he was Greek from Istanbul. So he came here to go to Lehigh University and he had an engineering degree, then became a computer scientist. I lived a very typical Upper West Side life
Sure.
where things are about academic achievement. I played violin for a long time. My father also played violin and socialists,
Well,
intellectuals,
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
at the same time accruing all sorts of things and accruing money and definitely on the hoarder spectrum. They were there on the hoarder spectrum a bit, but they were people who lived a professional life
Yeah.
and a personal life for many years and then both got sick and I'm their only child. So the life of a fancy-free intellectual living in a Woody Allen paradise, at some point there's like a record scratch and it's like, "Oh yeah, it's not just about dinner reservations and getting a gold star at work and a lot of recognition and feeling like you're contributing to the culture, because I was a magazine writer for a million years. What a great job. It's also about family duty, family responsibility, and particularly financial responsibility, which has been really hard for me because of the relationship I had with my parents financially and the relationship they had to finances, which was very complicated.
And to be fair, most family has its own lore as it's related to money, and
Mhm.
it's super complicated. I've yet to meet someone that doesn't have a sort of unique connection to money and how their parents may have treated it, how it's different for them. But let's go back a little. So, you really are the product of the American dream in many ways. Your dad came here as an immigrant and obviously was a very bright person. You point out that as the quote unquote kid, our job for quite some time is to make our parents proud and work hard and find our own path, which you did with great success as a writer, having had a lot of accolades in that part of your professional life. And the record scratch, I think, is the perfect visual for most of us because I think that's exactly how it goes down for the people in the sandwich generation, where we are cruising along in our own lives until we're not, until other people tap us on the shoulder and say, we need help, or they're not tapping us on the shoulder and we're the ones that have to scratch our own record and say, wait a minute, things are amiss. So, what was that moment for you, Vanessa, where you're forging your own path, making your own dinner reservations, as they say, and making your own plans? When did all of that change?
Yeah, so I started at New York Magazine as an assistant in the late '90s. I wasn't Carrie Bradshaw, I didn't write about my sex life, but I really had this life where I was just like tap, tap, tap on my laptop in bed, and it was a very lucrative career at that point, getting invites to a play, to a black tie gala, everybody's so happy to see me. I was really in the mix. I wrote also a lot about celebrities. So I've interviewed Madonna, Lady Gaga. I did her first interview. I spent 4 days with Taylor Swift for her first Rolling Stone cover. I'm known I did the first, like, Monica Lewinsky interview after Bill Clinton. It was, like, me and Diane Sawyer. I was the print, Diane Sawyer got the TV. Like, I really was a bold-faced name kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
reporter, and being in media is very consuming. It's a really exciting job, but it's a one that's very hard to put to bed at night, and sometimes you're working at night as well. And I had a baby that was much desired, right? And quite late. I had my first baby, I think I was like 36, 37.
Yeah.
And my parents had me a bit older, so they were then in their 70s, and they were over the moon, so happy about this tiny little baby girl, Olympia, after my heritage.
Mm.
And did I think everything seemed normal during that period of time? Not really. I was like, "These people are getting old," but I didn't think past that point, particularly because my father then retired when he was almost 80, and there was a lot of paperwork, and they had a flood in their house, and, like, different things were always happening that
Right.
put off the conversation about what does the end look like for you guys? Where are the passwords to your accounts? What are even your accounts? What is the financial situation? Because you guys are living in the same apartment that you had since like 1960, yet you seem to have money to pay for everything. So it was like this always this very mixed message with them
Yes.
where they drove secondhand cars, but there was money that was squirreled away. And they had both been part of 1968 Columbia. My mom went to Columbia. She was very anti-war, and they both were also younger children, which is really interesting. They were younger in their own families, and I don't know, was there a little Arrested Development? Who knows what, but it was basically we were not one of those families where people talked openly about money or said, "This is amazing, my X stock is doing so great," at the dinner table. That was all considered to be very gauche. And I got pregnant again with a boy, and I had him in June, and then at the end of August, my father was diagnosed with bone cancer.
Mm.
I mean, it was insane. It was everywhere in his body, and he passed away in the beginning of January.
Right.
So, during that period of time, we got the will in order. There's a few different things that we got in order, but he did not wanna talk to me about what was going on. When he was diagnosed, he had had an accident, and he was then in a wheelchair, and he never even turned on his computer again.
Good.
So, he was not in a place to sit down and say, "Vanessa, let me tell you how I've structured our finances and what you need to know." And indeed, my mother did the taxes, even though it was a more of a typical gendered relationship where he did deal with a lot of the finances. She did the taxes with him. They took their taxes very seriously. Like, they really were very organized in that way. But this is where my key mistake came in. After he passed away, obviously, I was totally heartbroken,
Right.
as was my mother. I found an estate attorney through my network of contacts of young professionals
Mhm.
in New York City
Mhm.
who was lovely, who my mom worked with. And I went to a few meetings. I signed all the forms. I did whatever it was that they wanted me to do. But I did not take any ownership in that process. Simultaneously knowing that my mother was, like, in her late 70s.
Right.
I had said when my dad was sick, "She's acting pretty weird. Are people noticing that she's acting pretty weird?" And everybody was like, "It's grief. I don't know what you're talking about. It's grief." And so I was like, "Sweet, you guys did everything. Seems good. Okay, cool." I've got 2 kids, by the
Oh,
way,
right.
a
You're in the thick of
baby.
it. You're literally in
I
the thick of it.
Yeah, I have a full-time job, very stressful. I'd started my own company then in 2019, and podcast company
Oh,
because magazines seem to be falling apart. So I was in the thick of starting a new company, having 2 kids. I live in the very isolated part of Brooklyn and Red Hook. I was just not thinking that I had to set up for success
yeah,
for me and my mom,
yeah,
and I didn't need any of her money, right? I was like, "You knock yourself out, do whatever you're gonna do, whatever you want, great." Like, I'm not after any of money goes to you in the will, and then it goes to me, and that's perfect.
right.
Oh.
There was an expected trajectory. But before you go on, I think 2 of the things that you said are interesting, which was the roles. And I think as adult children, we get really stuck before we make that first step and what our role is in the family unit. So you are the only child. Your parents' attention were probably very much on you
Mhm.
throughout your life. So it is a role reversal to turn around and look at your parents who, in your case, you had 2 very capable, educated adults who had always done a fantastic job. Who are we to step in? So number 1, role. Number
Exactly.
2,
Yeah.
ownership. And that is something that I talk about with my clients all of the time, and then their adult children, which does go back to role playing because you went through the motions of what you were supposed to do. And let's point out you were grieving, which is enormous. And
Mhm.
there is so much of grief is part of what we're talking about in the sandwich generation for various reasons. Grieving what our role used to be, what it's becoming, losing the parent that we love, all of the things related to grief. And you going in and checking the box. You are someone who is a researcher, a writer, you have resources, you have all of the things, and yet you are just trying to survive in all of that. And so, not maybe noticing signs. And I think that's where you're going to talk about what happened with your mom next,
Yeah.
because something so universal for all of us and those out there listening.
Right. I think what's unique about my story is I could have had these conversations, and for whatever reason, emotionally, as you say, I didn't feel comfortable doing it. It's not one of those stories where there were like a million brothers and sisters and somebody knew something and then the other ones didn't, and it becomes like a big mess. What I want people to know is that you're always better off dealing with this earlier and more fully, right? Because all that happens if you put it off is more aggravation, more headaches, more paperwork, more administrative burden, blah, 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 blah. And I appreciate you saying, of course, there's different roles and they're very hard to break out of.
Yes.
But I think my mom would have been open to talking some of that. But then as she got sicker, because she did develop some memory loss, then she did clamp down and say, "I've got everything under control,"
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And she had a fall about 4 years ago. It's
Mhm.
coming up on 4 years, and that was the fall that changed everything. Thankfully, I used that fall to get her in-home help that she had needed for at least a couple of years and was refusing to take,
Right.
as a lot of people have experienced. You're like, "Mom, Dad, can I get you a housekeeper?" And they're like, "Absolutely not, we would not pay for that." And it was like, "Are you aware that you're about to use your entire life savings
Exactly.
to take care of yourself? Maybe just get a housekeeper so you can spend a couple of years not bending over so you fall over or pull your back or whatever." Because people feel invisible and old people are difficult, and we all know all the reasons why these things are happening, but it is like a slow motion train wreck. And then, of course, a memory loss itself is like a slow motion train wreck. So I basically, as her only child, was just handed this whole basket of gifts, which is like, now it's time for you to figure out how to care for your mom. What's the best for her? Does she stay in her apartment? Does she leave?
Yeah.
She is in her apartment. Who should be taking care of her? So I spent at least 2 years figuring out who the best aides were, and knock on wood, they stay because she likes them and I love them, and they're allowing me to have the life to sit here and talk to you
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big believer that there are incredible home care aides out there, and it's just a matter of you finding them, and you just gotta keep working at it until you find
Absolutely.
the right people.
Yeah. But let's go back to the basket, right? So
Yeah.
you presented with, like, a basket,
Of dreadful gifts, yeah.
and the record scratch moment probably started when your dad got diagnosed, because I
Right.
think what happens to all of us is that we expect the fall, which did eventually happen with your mom, but if
Mhm,
you look back now, it's probably pretty clear for you to see that your role started changing upon your dad's diagnosis. And
mhm.
then you had these sort of like micro movements that slowly pushed you in the direction into the position that you're in now. And I think a lot of us, myself included, turn around and say, wait, how did I get here? Now, with the benefit of time and being able to look back in this sort of macro view, it's pretty clear. And so you found yourself pretty quickly from not having any sort of active role to taking on care for your mom with this memory impairment that I think a lot of people deal with. And the trick of memory impairment too is that for a certain amount of time, the in between, the purgatory where the client, the parent has some capacity, but maybe not enough requisite capacity to manage their whole lives. And then where do we step in as the adult child? How do we be respectful in such a way that respects their agency and who they are as people while keeping them safe and keeping yourself sane? And the basket is the perfect analogy because you're handed this basket of figure this out, do the finances, figure out the care, deal with the doctors, run your own life. And that sort of brought us to our common ground, which is what you hope to do and what you are doing with your podcast.
Yeah, I felt like there needed to be a forum for people to talk about this because I found it to be one of the most life-changing and loneliest experiences I've ever had. Because I am a bit older of a parent to my children, and because my parents also got married when they were older. We are
Mhm.
the ultimate examples of my mom is 83, I am midlife, I have a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Sure.
There's big gaps here. I have found that I'm very alone in this because most of the friends that I have who are through my kids, they're a bit younger than me and they haven't experienced this yet. And even a lot of my friends from way back, their parents are still okay in their 80s, maybe because they're of a certain socioeconomic bracket. And I'm not saying a parent hasn't died here or there,
Yeah.
but I'm not seeing a lot of people who are involved in daily long term care for a parent in my specific little cohort of friends. I think, and even if I did, and to be frank, I have a friend's wife whose dad just went through the 80th Street residence and he just passed away. So now he's ahead of my mom. And like, I have talked to her. It's hard for her. Her dad has just passed away. It's difficult when you're talking to people whose parents have memory loss. You start having the conversation, and then somebody says, okay, my mom is much further along
Yeah.
than your mom now.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of a weird conversation sometimes anyway, but not having siblings turns out to suck. Turns out to not be ideal. We got all the presents as kids, but now not ideal. And I know that people fight with their brothers and sisters, and I'm sure that there is nothing like the pain and the anger, like the fiery core of anger that you can feel towards somebody who says, I'm doing so much, I call mom on Sunday and I send her things on Amazon. I get all that, but
Yeah.
it's also hard to just be me in my brain trying to put all these things together. And one other thing to know about me is I'm a perfectionist. So everything I do, I want to have done it perfectly. Like a lot of women, I think, who are professional in midlife, like I want it to be perfect. And then, that there's just too many things to do to make them perfect. But I just felt like I wasn't able to have these conversations with the number of people I wanted to talk to about it.
And so
Um,
tell me, like, so you find Campside Media. That's just remarkable in and of itself, right? Where
yeah.
we talk about playing these multiple roles in life. And so you're a business owner, you're a parent of young children, you're a grieving daughter, you're also the daughter and advocating for someone who perhaps is not at the same level she once was. What was the transition to saying, all right, now I'm going to create the podcast for the loneliness? That is partly why you know my story. And that is definitely something that struck a nerve when we first had our conversation about how hard it is and how lonely it is being in the trenches and feeling incredibly isolated. And I think even people with siblings would say the same thing because we all deal with it differently and we all play a role within the family. And back to the role playing, who can do or who can pay for or who can be there. And we all feel like we're failing. And there's loneliness in that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we Campside Media is a journalism company first and foremost. So we make a lot of investigative podcasts. We're all magazine writers from like the Times Magazine or New York Magazine, Vanity Fair, GQ, those sort of in the now it's like we make horses and buggies or something in this day and age, like to do journalism and really try to do it right is like this thing of oldie times. But we're all these long form journalists who love digging into a story. And the podcast business has really changed where now people want their hosts to be talking from a place of lived experience,
Mm.
of authenticity, of what really matters to you. And when we decided at the company we need to get into this game, when I looked at myself, I was like, this is what I'm really doing and thinking about day in and day out. This is a thing that really needs community and people need an outlet.
Talk about
Yeah,
authenticity. You're literally in the midst of it. You are in the throes of it.
exactly.
So who else
Exactly.
other than you?
Yeah, and we had a real estate attorney talk about step-up basis and what to do with your parents' home,
Yeah.
or a friend of mine who's a volunteer, hospice person, she talked about that experience. It's an entire ecosystem of people doing incredible work that the media does not cover because it's depressing.
Yeah.
Like, let's just be real.
Yes,
It's
it
depressing.
is.
Nobody wants to think about death. Everybody is really focused on youth in this culture. People are trying to make themselves look 30 years younger every day when they get up in the morning. That's like their number one thing they're gonna do. So, who wants to really talk about this? But to me, it's politically speaking, I'm like, this is the stuff of government. This is what we all need help with,
Yes.
is figuring out care in these arenas. Specifically happens to be happening with my mom to me, happened to me with my kids before, but I just accepted, okay, there's no help for that.
I think what you're talking about is so important that we are in the midst of this crisis, right? We have there are so many different monikers, the silver tsunami, the caregiving crisis, all of these
Yes.
things.
Mhm.
You're right that it is a societal problem and we have a government that doesn't help us with the solutions. So, people like you and me and all of the people that we have on these podcasts, we're hoping to provide the resources so that we can, as a society, put our own patchwork, our own quilt together of experts to make it maybe a little easier for people that come behind us because nobody else is helping us. No.
Yeah, I think
Grow in-
that's what the issue is, the scales fall from your eyes beginning with, "Oh, Medicare doesn't pay for long-term health."
Yeah.
And once you realize that, it's just the beginning
It falls apart
of
from
the
there.
journey that you have to go on, and I'm lucky, that I am a journalist, so I investigate, I find things out. I like nothing more than to, like, master a topic, but the amount of paperwork that I then have to do on the other side is just I was earlier today, I'm gonna look at this because it happens to be right here. I am taking power of attorney on an account of Fidelity, as one does,
Yep.
and then I was planning to transfer some money, and they said, "Oh, but we don't have your standing transfer instructions document, which needs a silver medallion," which is a notary, and I'm like, "When we did those forms 6 weeks ago, that he needed to be notarized. Did you wanna tell me that there was another form that would need to be notarized before I made changes to the
Yeah.
account that
Yeah.
clearly was what I was trying to
Yeah.
do?" So it's just like it's form after form after form after form, and for high net worth individuals, I get it. There's ways your investment banker, whoever it is gonna glide this path for you. But in truth, it's still a rocky path. Like, you're still gonna have to
It
sign
is.
stuff, and you're still gonna have to deal with much more stuff than you want to deal with. And because of scammers, obviously, every bank has created like 17 layers of authentication.
Which we call roadblocks, but no,
W
you're right.
There's roadblocks every
You're
place you
right.
go, so you're already in a game of Tetris when you're a full-time employee and a mom. You're already just every 15 minutes is so meaningful to you, you're trying to pack so many things into it, but you add in caring for an older person, which I describe as like having a toddler that doesn't live with you, and then you add the financial piece, which if you as I explained, maybe at too much length earlier, I have all this stuff that is complex psychologically from my parents around finances because they really taught me, like, the number one thing you need to know about money is to never think about money.
Mm,
That's the number one thing you need. Well, it turns out you need a lot of money to never think about money,
you
right?
absolutely do, and
And
you need to have all the right people to help you with that process.
Right, exactly. So it's like now I have a situation where, okay, we've got a good thing going with my mom at home, but are we going to need Medicaid or is she going to move into a place? Is it better for her to move into a place? I know it's better for me,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that question, every question around I'll speak to middle class and above, like, how do you manage this person's money so it throws off enough money that they can stay at home with a Social Security, which doesn't get you far in 2025, 2026. Plus, so now you're just involved in a enormous math
You
equation.
know
And
what
the
it is?
math equation is,
Yeah.
what do I have to fill in so that she can live in a way that I feel really good about, that I know she'll be cared for, that doesn't require me to quit my job. Another moment when the scales really fell from my eyes
Mhm.
is, and I should have called you up, is a friend of mine said, "You need to meet this estate attorney. He really helped me." And I went and talked to him, and he had looked me up beforehand and knew I was a writer of some note. And he said, "Vanessa, I want to help you because I want my girls to be able to look at somebody like you and for you to still have a job, and for you not to have to quit your job so that you have to live in totally the domestic and financial sphere dealing with your parents and dealing with your mom." And I was like, "Oh my god, I didn't even know we were gonna be was this conversation gonna go there? Is my life going there? I don't even know who I am if I'm not a professional person."
Yeah, I that's such an important point, and I can see how impactful that is, and I've been there, Vanessa, where
Yeah,
you really lose yourself in the process because it's so much and because
yeah,
you're starved for resources, and we are also frustrated and sad and trying to figure out our path, and people aren't helping, and I think even for those who have resources, that feeling of overwhelm is universal. I
right.
don't care if you have endless resources, it is still you stepping into someone else's life and trying to figure out what the best thing is for them, and it is such a responsibility, but in many ways, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it is a burden.
Yeah,
And so what you're doing is so important, Vanessa, because you are yet another person in the very small pool of people who are recognizing people like us and trying to make it easier and creating a podcast like So Your Parents Are Old from a place of humor and bringing in the experts and even bringing in those people who are well known that are dealing with these sorts of things. Bradley Cooper made an amazing documentary on caregiving.
yeah,
And a lot of people think someone like him wouldn't have to deal with the burden of trying to figure out all of the things you talked about, like a medallion guarantee and
right,
what
right.
Medicare does, but yet here we are, and we have to help ourselves and people similarly situated figure it out, and it is an incredible responsibility. You're killing it if nobody has told you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But no, I think people will be talking about this more and more. You can even see the New York Times is starting to run a lot more op-eds about your aging parents. What is this really like? People are starting to be honest about the amount of money. What is this? This is $3,500 a week to take
Yeah.
care of this person?
Yep.
I do think the silver tsunami, or just demographically, it's so extraordinary what's about to happen with the boomers aging. And adult children are really gonna have a lot of the same wake-up call that I have, and I only wish that you could put together like, you need to put together a YouTube channel that tells everybody what to do, because I can imagine from your perspective, it's, "Oh my god, I'm now gonna explain this all again to a
Yeah.
new client because 'cause you're seriously taking people who are uneducated about this, and they need this help so badly, and they're coming to you, and you gotta bring them from, like, 0 to 100 really quick.
It's true, yeah, but
And
listen, that's why we're calling it the survival guide, right? Because
right,
we're trying to create the guide that we didn't have and provide the
right.
resources and the
Yeah.
people and the information and the data, all of the information that we didn't have so that it makes it easier for the others that come after us. And hopefully it will be addressed as a society one day. And maybe we will have the government infrastructure that will help pay for things like this because I can speak for so many families out there. It's the largest cost after college, which is long term care. And we don't have great solutions here in the US. I think that one of the saving graces is technology, and I've had some amazing people on the podcast to highlight how technology can help, and hopefully we'll have some big brains and generations to come that will help us find those solutions, but in the interim, Vanessa, it's you and me,
Yeah.
and it's our podcast, and
That's right.
hopefully we're providing folks with some great
Yeah.
information. But I'm
Absolutely.
so happy to have you here today with me. I am a novice podcaster, and you certainly are somebody who is entrenched in the world, and I really
You're
admire.
doing great. You're doing amazing. I love it. Thank you so much for having me on. I
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. And so for everyone out there, we'll have all of the information on so your parents are old. I want you to
Mhm.
tune in. I want you to email to Vanessa, give her ideas of people you want to hear from because she's
Yes.
definitely listening. So we really
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. A new episode drops each month. And if you're enjoying it, please don't forget to leave me a 5-star review and share with your fellow Sandwich Generation members. For a complete listing of past podcast episodes, you can check out any podcast platform, or you can head to my website at www.sandwichgenerationlaw.com. Thanks for listening.